Greetings, scholars, and welcome to prehistoric art. Humankind has been around for at least a quarter of a million years. 250,000 years is my conservative estimate of Homo sapiens. Whereas art has been around, that we can see, between 30,000 and 25,000 years ago. I would make a note now about BC versus BCE and AD versus CE for when we're talking about age dates. There's another video about that, which will be available for you elsewhere. Archaeology can only find the evidence that's left behind. Not everything survives. So the fact that we have art from around 25,000 to 30,000 BCE does not mean that humans hadn't been creating some artistic expression. It's just that it is the only kind of artistic expression that has survived. Organic materials rarely survive, only in special circumstances. We have paint from before this period by a little bit, and so that may be an indication of body painting or some other kind of painting expression that was before we started painting on cave walls. Importantly, though, we do not have hints of art, paint, and artistic expression dating back to the beginning of humankind. All of human history doesn't really begin until we start becoming human. What does becoming human mean? My argument for you today is that that is when we started expressing ourselves through art. Unlike every other animal on the planet, we merely stopped surviving and became human. To survive, you must find food and shelter, protect your mate and your offspring, and avoid danger or injury. So what made us use our time for activities other than survival? What made us use our energy and our fuel and our materials and resources for something that doesn't make survival sense? Why did we put ourselves in risk of injury and danger for something that had nothing to do with sort of those pragmatic utilitarian reasons for survival? Art should never have existed if we were purely pragmatic creatures, but it does, and it exploded around 30,000 years ago. The first case we're going to look at is the Hall of the Bulls in Lascaux Cave in France, probably one of the most famous cave painting sites known. It dates from between 13,000 and 15,000 BCE. All right, art critique time. Genre, painting. Medium, pigment. Ochre, soot, these earth pigments, and some sort of binder. I will tell you it's usually spit at this time. Technique, finger painting, spatula maybe. Also, we've got an example of early spray paint. Now your point of view, worm's eye. You're looking up at these stampeding animals. You can see for scale there, there's these floodlights and someone is documenting the art. Let's say that guy's about 6 foot tall. So very worm's eye. You're looking up into this gallery space, which in a cave, a gallery is sort of a big open room inside a cave. And this is deep in the cave. It's difficult to get to. There is no natural light. So on top of your POV being worm's eye, also think about your point of view. Your natural light source would be firelight, a torch, maybe a few torches, but you wouldn't be able to illuminate the entire room. Or if you did, it'd just be by firelight. So imagine as you hold your torch up, you're sort of illuminating different spots rolling around here, and these larger than life bulls are running in all directions. It would be atmospheric. It would be movement and energy. It'd be like a stampede. Let's also think your point of view. Deep in a cave, no natural light, you are risking injury just to access this space, access it to create the art, and access it to view the art. There's a risk to climb so high to paint these images. It would have required secondary structures like scaffolding or ladders, certainly a lot of fuel for fire and light, using resources, risking injury for things that have nothing to do with survival. Is this personal art? Deep in a cave, difficult to get to, some sacrifice had to be made to create this art, and it's in a large space with excellent acoustics, by the way. So we can imagine that this is most likely some social experience. This space would have been used for some communal event. So is it deliberately creating an atmosphere in this place that is used for ritual, music, prayer, storytelling, culture? Remember, only the tangible things survive. The stone, prayers, dance, singing, language before it's written down. We have to look at these tangible objects, the material culture that's left behind, and think about the intangible things that didn't survive that had to have been associated with them. So, had to have been associated, we can certainly say survival had to have been kind of on lock. We aren't just scraping along. We have more than enough so that we have certain people do not have to be spending all day looking for food, taking care of shelter, providing for children, protecting partners, right? You've got these free time people or free time amongst the collective group. Also, we have to assume a collective group for someone to be able to paint instead of search for food and protect their shelter. We have this collective communal experience. We have a society of some sort, a social organization. Beyond that, we may think there has to be some structure, some political structure, in just the sense of people understanding their roles within the group. And beyond that, communication, language, expression. We have art. Do we have music? Do we have religion? We almost certainly have storytelling. But those aren't the things that survive. These mark an event that was special enough that perhaps these intangible things were being expressed. Quick note on those earth tones. This is the side of a cliff that is covered in a variety of iron oxides. They often come in these sort of streaky veins, and you've got your yellows, your oranges, your reds. You've got an entire warm analogous color palette here of pigment that can just be scraped off, ground down, and used as is with any kind of binder. Could be egg whites, could be eggs, could be spit, could be sap or resin from a tree. And so there's an entire analogous color palette right there on the side of this cliff. Next example we have is the Cave of the Hands in Argentina. This is also around 13,000 years old. Note how Lascaux is in France and Cave of the Hands is in Argentina. This means that art exploded, give or take a few thousand years in a 250,000 year history. It's a very narrow window, very close to one another on two separate continents. Also in Australia, by the way. So on everywhere that humans are inhabiting around this time, we have art exploding, suddenly comes into being. All right, the height of this cave ranges from about 7 feet high to 33 feet high, and it is around 80 feet deep. The hands, many different sizes, which means it's many different people, including children. They're small hands. So this is a collective, social, community artwork. Also, it is mostly left hands. So the technique for this is the spray paint. So holding one's left hand out and sucking up liquid paint through a reed or a straw and then spitting it out onto your left hand, making that sort of negative image with the spray halo around it. Does that tell us that most people were right-handed? These are some basic intangibles that we can kind of extrapolate with a fair amount of certainty. But beyond that, why did they do this at all? Is this the signature of an ancient group of people? Are they marking territory? Are they marking an event, a celebration, a memorial of some sort? Is it the age-old human mortality struggle of trying to leave your mark on the world before you're gone so that people remember you? That can sound silly, but it was successful. 13,000 years later, we know that they were there. All right, Cosquier Cave in France, about 25,000 years ago. And we got a lot of cave art in France. The geology of France means that there's a lot of caves, and it seems that there were a lot of bipedal hominids kicking around. It was a pretty crowded place that kind of has nice weather and stuff. Animals, plants probably were very plentiful. So there were a lot of hominids competing for this space, and they were leaving their mark behind by this period. So notice, how about those missing fingers? I got two hypotheses for you. One, times were tough in the Paleolithic. Stone tool making is a whole lot of force and a whole lot of sharp objects very close to your fingers. People get hurt. Or is it a sort of language, like a signed language that's written down? So you can make shapes by hiding a couple fingers and then laying it down and spraying, because you can see that this is the same kind of negative image imprint like the Cave of the Hands. Could this be the first written symbols, the first written language? It's tantalizing. We will probably never be able to answer that question, but this is an example of the kind of range that we can absolutely safely say that they could make liquid paint and that they could spray it. But beyond that, our realm of probability to possibility can be a quite excitingly wide frame. It wasn't all cave paintings. We have sculptures. We've had sculptures for about 30,000 years. And we have here some tools. An atlatl. An atlatl is a spear thrower. When you are throwing a spear, how far you can throw it sort of depends on how long your arms are, which is pretty related to how tall you are. An atlatl is basically a stick with a handle on it and a little hook at the end so that you can set your spear on it, and it basically makes your arm about a foot or two longer than it is. So you can throw a spear as if you're 9 feet tall. All right, so it has a utilitarian purpose. It is a tool. Why is it decorated? Why take the extra time? Why expend the extra energy when a simple handle would do? Does a spear thrower work better if it has a pretty handle? Think about pocket knives. They're usually very highly decorated. Is it any sharper because the handle's decorated? Why do we carry decorated tools? Why do you have decorative pens? Why does your notebook look different from someone else's notebook? The art is constrained to the size and shape and use of the tool. So on the left there on the red, we have a mammoth, kind of stylized with the tusks laying against the trunk, and you can see that the rest of it is cut off, and the rest of the hook would have been his trunk. You have the reindeer swimming, which are quite sweet and observationally naturalistic. If you've ever seen a deer swim or a dog swim, and they sort of lay their head back and their ears against the back of their necks and they doggy paddle, there was thought put into it. There was a certain amount of observational, realistic interpretation of what these animals look like. These may have been the animals that were hunted with these tools. Whether or not it's good luck to have a mammoth carved on your atlatl, will you have a better chance of hitting mammoth with your lucky mammoth-shaped atlatl? Would we call that religious or ritualistic, or would we say it's like your lucky socks? before a big game. Calling it ritualistic or cult-like practices is kind of an official term for it, but if you think about it, we haven't changed a bit for why do we decorate anything that's utilitarian. I now take you to Çatalhöyük in the fields of Turkey, or what is modern-day Turkey. It's an urban settlement that is 8,000 years old. The exterior walls of the houses were shared, as in my wall and my neighbor. We both have just one wall in between us, like apartment complexes do today. There was a division of labor. You didn't have a backyard, you didn't have a garden, you didn't have your own animals. So not everybody grows their own food or finds or hunts their own food. It's this first massive scale of division of labor. If I make pots all day, every day, I have to trust that those around me in my community will provide my food in exchange for my non-food specialization. It is a risk. It is scary, but it happened. Now look at how many of us work in skills that do not provide food. This is the beginning of that concept. A group is more efficient when labor is divided into specialisms, but it is very risky for the individual, especially with the uncertainty at the beginning. When times are fine, I can make pots all day and depend on people for food. But what happens? Am I the first to starve when something goes wrong? This idea of collective trust and a community in order to divide labor was the next big step. Let's zoom into one of these apartments, one of these 8,000-year-old apartments. It's a small space, but there are several things in this room that are simply non-functional. The tiny alcoves with the low access seem an odd way to store grain. Those little pillars that are sticking up there, those are modern interventions to keep the wall from crumbling above it. But the access to those is difficult. Look at the thing on the right side there with the bullhorn sticking into it. Raised platform. It was kind of initially thought to be a bed, but there's no access to it. And the horns are pointing inward, as if you'd roll over and get your eye poked out. Bull horns and bull skulls were also found on the walls in several rooms throughout the city. So this may have been associated with a widespread religious or ritual practice of some sort. This isn't just one weird person's home. This is something that recurred over and over again throughout the city. So what is that space? I don't know. And neither do any of the archaeologists there. When we go through all of the reasons, as in utilitarian reasons that you can think of, there isn't one. There isn't one to not waste space like that. So it must be something that is wasteful in that survival only kind of definition of wasteful. So we're moving into humans aren't pragmatic, or else art would never have existed. Division of labor probably would have never existed. We would never have invented culture. All right, but it's not all silliness. I give you this wall painting found at Çatalhöyük. It is a large painted wall plaster on an exterior wall. So this was not in an individual house, but on public view. So what is it? It may be the first city map ever drawn. Stay with me. Are you ready? I'm going to show you two things. First, this is the volcano of Hakan Dağ, and this photograph is taken from the site of Çatalhöyük, approximately where this painting was found. So if you look, it's kind of got these two humps, and the one on the right, you can see was the active part of the volcano that sometimes barfs or spits liquid. Take you back over here. Note the barfing and spitting of liquid coming out of the right hump of this two-humped feature. And on the lower right here, we have the plan view map that archaeologists have drawn in their survey of what has been excavated so far, which we know is only a small slice of this city. It looks pretty darn similar to what we see down here with these little square, rectangular arrangements. Could the volcano be stylized so that you can recognize if you're facing the volcano that sometimes spits out of its right hump, then you are here and these apartments are over this way. It is perhaps a map to the individual houses in this city. All right, so the map is our maybe pragmatic work of art, public art. Here's my certainly pragmatic ceramics and pottery. I have read in several textbooks that you do not have to buy because they made me angry. So soapbox begins here. Ceramics were invented 5,000 years ago. I have the exhibit A and B here, 1 and 2. I have several hundred more if you need them. We've had ceramics for somewhere around as long as we have had art exploding as far as cave art. So this becomes a marriage of art and technology sort of exploding at the same time. The Venus of Dolní Věstonice, it is baked clay. This Japanese pottery is higher fired clay, but ceramics, bricks, fired heated clay items, this technology seems to have been mastered globally around the same time that art and expression started making a mark, also globally. The connections are tantalizing, and it begins this story of human expression and communication and thoughts and desires and priorities beyond simply surviving. So when did we stop being one species of bipedal hominid and start being human? I would say around 30,000 years ago, because this is behavior that is unique. Living no longer means surviving to the human species. And we have this material archive to prove it. The story of art starts here. And I think that that is the beginning of culture. Many animals communicate. Many animals are social creatures. Many animals build homes and have extended family groups and return to the same places, having this sort of sense of nostalgia. There are a lot of things that seem like sophisticated behavior that many other kinds of animals do. But what other animals don't seem to have is culture. And the human species didn't seem to have any expression of culture beyond what we can sort of also observe in other animals until this moment when we see art. And is art the thing that makes us human? Is art the thing that makes society culture? I'm going to argue yes, because I'm your art history professor. But this is the beginning of the story that we're going to be looking at through the rest of this semester and into 211 if you take it, into the rest of the humanities series if you take it. But certainly through the rest of your life, you are observing, participating in, and describing human culture. And today's lecture is chapter 1 of where that all came from. What does it mean? It just simply means, for sure, that at some point we stopped surviving, and this is what it means to live. It's a lot more complicated than that, but we'll have to unpack that together another time.